All right, we're going to go to John in New Hampshire. Pronouns he, him. Says that the historical Jesus may have existed. Response to the new chat poll. I am not a mythicist, but I want to sit in the front seat of this conversation. So
I'm ready for it.
So do I.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, how you doing?
Hey,
John,
Mike,
I'm
what's
John
up?
too.
Yeah, the Johns. Mythicist
Hey.
John versus
Yeah,
non-mythicist
how you doing
John.
there, godless engineer?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
So listen. Good. So I'm an atheist, and I'm a longtime listener to the show. And when I saw the poll question of "Do you think Jesus existed?" on the poll, I answered yes because sure, a guy named Jesus might have existed then. And then I went to diving deeper into my train of thought, and I said, well, what does Jesus mean? I guess you have to define, the biblical Jesus, or a guy named Jesus who happened to be a tailor, whatever. So I just hit yes, and I decided to call the show and shout out to the screener because she was great, and here I am talking to you guys. So mad respect to both of you.
Yeah. So typically with the historical Jesus, like if you're an atheist, you're talking about the minimal historical Jesus. So that would be just itinerant rabbi that collected a group of guys or just followers that then was, executed by the Romans, and religion popped up around him after the fact. That's generally what atheists mean whenever they talk about a historical Jesus. Is that the one that you're talking about?
I suppose I would have to say yes. The Christian Bible, historical Jesus that we all think about in, the movies and all that stuff. Yeah, Jesus.
It's funny how culty that sounds.
Jesus. Yeah.
It's funny how culty that sounds when it's so vague like that. There's this guy, and he had a bunch of people that followed him, and a whole bunch of people. Yeah, sorry.
All right. So, why do you think that he actually existed?
I think he existed in the same way that all of us exist. His name happened to be Jesus, and he happened to, be a prophet.
I'm sorry, John, but that's not the question I asked.
Now you got to ask yourself, how many? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, the question I asked was, why do you believe he existed? Like, typically, we have evidence for believing in the things that we think are true. Even for historical claims, we're talking about evidence that makes it more likely than not. So I'm asking for, like, what references or what evidence do you have that makes Jesus's existence more likely than not?
Yeah, the only evidence I have is that I asked Alexa about 15 minutes before I got on the phone with you, because I was thinking the same thing. What am I asking here? Why am I on the phone? And all your poll said was, do you think Jesus existed? And my answer was, yeah. A man named Jesus probably existed. And I think the evidence is, Alexa's answer. In the first century, Jesus was the most common, a very popular name.
Okay, yeah, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about random ass Jesus.
You're doing my camp a disservice right now.
We're not talking about random ass Jesuses. Well, just to give you a for instance here, there was Jesus ben Ananias that was in the first century too, that was written about by Josephus, I believe. And the curious thing about him is that he's got a similar progression as Jesus does in Mark's gospel when talking about his passion and TikTok language and his execution. So there were Jesuses and there were Messiahs that were claiming to be Messiahs at that time. Like Josephus even records the Egyptian who collected a number of rebels around him and tried to take on the Romans, but he eventually failed and wandered off, a complete failure. So, there are instances of these, but I feel like this just proves that we should have some kind of evidence of this minimal historical Jesus walking around and doing things if he actually did those things. So that's what I'm at. So obviously there's going to be Jesus's walking around. Yeshua is a very divinely connected name to Yahweh. And basically Jewish mothers were naming, their kids Jesus because they thought that they were, the second coming or whatever. And so like, yeah, that was a common name, but that we're not asking for just random ass Jesuses. We're asking about the Jesus that collected a group of people, who was eventually executed by the Romans under Pontius Pilate, and a religion popped up around him after the fact. That's the Jesus that we're talking about.
And that's a lot to try to put into a poll question.
Also a lot for Alexa to respond with. I would agree.
Oh, yeah. So can I ask you one question, if I may? Because I was wondering this about you, and it's a tough one for me. When people ask, especially with the presuppositionist word salad, I find myself struggling to try to think of how I would answer some questions, to keep up with the BS. Have either of you ever, run, or I'm sure you probably have. Would you mind telling me about, and telling the audience about a time where you had a pause moment where you went, that kind of put a little, you can't respond quite as quickly, but you want to? And I guess I'll end the call from there, and thank you for your time.
Is this? All right, are you still there, John? Is there some? I might have missed a bit of it. Yeah, what specifically towards the Jesus stuff, or just like in general, kind of theist,
I guess
atheist
a little
stuff,
bit of both. Because we're on an atheist talk show, so I suppose about religion. When you've come up like a street of let's say an Anthony Magnabosco of the other side comes up to you and just makes you think about something for a second. Has that ever happened to you? And how has it strengthened your belief system?
Yeah, I mean, John, I don't know if you want to go first. I have a few things, but they're like more like nuanced philosophical positions that I held on to that kind of tie to my spiritual past in a way, maybe. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I would just say that, the historicity of Jesus is one thing. It wasn't like a street epistemological thing, but it was more like I was engaged in like Facebook commentary, like a Facebook group, talking about the historical nature of Jesus. And I said, of course, Jesus existed. And they were like, oh, okay, well, what evidence do you have to prove it? And so I'm like, okay, I'll just go and I'll quickly Google it. It's got to be there. And that sent me down a rabbit hole where I eventually became a mythicist, because I just couldn't find any evidence that was convincing to me that there actually was a Jesus that existed. And so, I got challenged on it, and I didn't have a good answer at the time. And it took me a long time to really suss out how I felt about the question.
Yeah. It's kind of weird for me. In terms of theism, I've never heard an argument that just even comes close to convincing for me. Because when I'm not talking with somebody about the philosophy about it, when they're clinging to philosophy for their beliefs, and it's just I had this experience and this kind of stuff, they're those are really bad to me. Sometimes I'm not sure if the person's lying to me about this experience. And I've talked with I bring Aaron up all the time, but I shoot the shit with him about these topics a lot because he was a former Christian. And I told him, I was sometimes I talk to these people, I feel like they're just lying to me about their experience or whatever. And, right. He assured me, no, it's not the case. Look, I came from this background. You genuinely, believe these things, and you genuinely believe that you have these experiences. You just kind of interpret them different later along the road. But when I get into some meat on the table, there's some premises
to it. What's that book? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
What's that?
No, it's fine.
What's that book? The Proof of Heaven or whatever. This guy that, this doctor that died and said he saw a picture above the bed while he was being operated on. Yada 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 yada.
I'm not sure.
And I try to explain to people that there could be a little bit of lying there. There could be a little bit of a memory that they don't remember. When they were 4-year-old, they visited their grandmother's house and they saw this picture that they always kind of remembered for some other reason, and whatever. It's much more likely that that's the truth than that this person actually died and remembered a death experience.
I have this thing where it's
sometimes Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I have this thing where on the realm, I'm just kind of on the realm of theism. It's just I've like wanted some argument that gets me there, but like I've always just detected these like crazy kind of metaphysical assumptions that can't get off the ground unless you accept these other things. Like if you're a Thomist and you lay out this view about change and there's actualization of potential, and you start to realize like, okay, there's this whole notion about like sustaining causes in the universe, and I wouldn't believe in sustaining causes unless I already believed in God. So like for me, I see the same kind of trend in it's like an esoteric view called Thomism. It follows Saint Thomas Aquinas, right? And so there's these arguments that are given, and this is like an example I'm using where someone will kind of give this argument, and it's easy to kind of just go through the premises, but when you really understand what's going on in a lot of these philosophical arguments, there's like highly contentious like metaphysical assumptions about the world, right? About like the way things are and certain views that you have to take in order to get off the ground. And so for them, it's like you have to believe that they're like sustaining causes like in the universe, and I don't see any argument to get me to sustaining causes unless I already believed in God, right? It seems just like parasitic on like the conclusion. Like I already would need to believe in God in order
with you, brother.
Right. So those are knocked out for me, though I leave them open because I love having those conversations, and I love like, maybe I'm wrong about the assumptions and someone can get me off the ground and we go from there. But for me, it was really like, it was flat earth that was the first time I felt really challenged. And I believe it was in a college class before I had dropped out the first time I went back. Someone asked me about the shape of the earth, and I didn't know, right? This is ultimately what brought me back to school and to get a little degree. Was that I was not motivated when I went to school then at all. I didn't really care to like better myself. I didn't care about knowledge. And this person was like challenging me on, because they're, flat earthers. Just like, oh, I've got to show everybody that I'm a flat earther. And we're getting in this conversation, and I cannot I just couldn't defend my view. Like I was like, oh my God, maybe I walk away. I'm like, maybe the earth is fucking flat. I have no idea now. I go online, I'm looking, and I'm just like obsessing over this. And then now I start to like learn about like different things, just something as simple as like the Southern Cross and observers from different parts of the earth, and how it would be like geometrically impossible for someone, in these areas to see it if the earth was flat, right? And that is the reason why I'm sitting in this chair today, was because of that conversation, because someone put me in a vulnerable spot where I didn't know what I believed. And I was already going through this process of like deconstructing these spiritual beliefs and becoming like more rational. I had flirted with atheism and stuff when I was younger and all that, but I went to this weird hippie stuff, right? And it's almost sucked me back in. And that flat earth, man, that would have been the last thing for me. That's all I would have needed to just never be here and maybe grifting some, astrology book somewhere. So long-winded, but yeah, that was the first time. Going forward, I've been challenged on other things like, nominalism versus Platonism and these kind of things. There's an atheist that gives a very thought-provoking argument against natural selection. He accepts evolution but disagrees with the theory. That's an interesting argument. Gave me a lot of trouble. So there's stuff that have given me trouble, but there's stuff that like when I talk to more well-educated people or I read more material, I start to see what the tricks are that are going on. You know what I mean?
What excites your education, Gene? What keeps you going? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it changed me entirely as a person, for sure.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry, I get excited about talking about that because I'm like, yeah, I was almost flat earther. That's just a crazy polar opposite of what I would have become. So
yeah.
But yeah, thank you for inquiring about that.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Yep.